Hello everyone, and we are thrilled to have you here today for the National Gallery of Australia's 2022 National Visual Arts Education Conference. My name is Ian R.T. Collis. I'm from the Darrablap clan of the Gundungurra people and the very proud grandson of the extraordinary, the late Auntie Dawn Collis. My role at the National Gallery is the West Farmers Indigenous Leadership Coordinator, running and directing the Indigenous Arts Leadership Arts Program by West Farmers Arts, our wonderful partners. We're indeed very grateful. The National Gallery Visual Arts Education Conference brings together teachers, artists, cultural practitioners, and thought leaders to inspire and to energise best practice and to explore teaching methods and learnings within the visual arts sectors. I'm thrilled to be your MC throughout this conference, and I am thrilled to talk to you about this afternoon and this 3 days of a national conference in which you are all here today. And what a fantastic schedule and workshops the National Gallery have planned for you ahead. So I'm just so excited to see you all here and online. This year's conference is presented alongside the 4th National Indigenous Arts Triennial Ceremony exhibition. Our keynote speaker this morning is none other than the ceremony curator and senior curator at large, Hetti Perkins from the Adanda and Kalkadu peoples. We thank our learning and digital patron, the wonderful Tim Fairfax, AO, for his support in this conference and in honour of Betty Churcher, AO. Thanks to the incredible digital capacity, we are pleased to welcome you both here on site at the National Gallery in Ngunnawal, Ngambri, and also online. In the next 3 days, this program will focus on the work of First Nations cultural practitioners and artists, educators and thought leaders, and undertake a program of active and activating learning experiences that challenge and empower all educators to embed First Nations perspectives within their practice. To start our conference today and to officially welcome you into Ngunnawal, I am very pleased and thrilled to ask the extraordinary Auntie Mary Atkinson of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri, of the Ngunnawal and Wurundjeri people to welcome us here today. Auntie Mary, thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Yurdumarang, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today. I must acknowledge and thank Aaliyah Bradbury for inviting me to be a part of this conference, and all of those here at the gallery also. I'm Auntie Mary Atkinson, a proud Ngunnawal Wurundjeri woman. My mum's Ngunnawal, my dad's Wurundjeri, so I was born just down the road, lived down the road at Yass there for many, many years. Had to pull up there and do the photo thing of my old area when I come, the selfie with the, as you do. So I spoke with my auntie, who is my mum's sister and the last remaining of that generation in our family at the moment. So we're just trying to cherish those moments that we have together. So I'm very proud, and it's a pleasure to do this Welcome to Country for you guys today. Aboriginal people have always known how important it is to teach and guide young ones, and has done so for many years from the beginning of our dreaming. And now and into the future, it continues that we teach our young ones from that. And we always had that in us to do that. So it's important as you as educators here at this conference, I've got to get my head around that, the National Visual Art Education Conference. That's a very long word. So it's important that you guys know and understand how us as Aboriginal people have always tried to teach our young ones and instill our stories that are telling our stories throughout history. Every time a formal welcome to country is given, it continues a tradition that has always been a part of Aboriginal culture. Except for a recent lapse of about 200 plus years, it was always given by the way of welcome when permission was granted to visit a different tribal area. When we talk about Aboriginal and traditional country, we mean something beyond the dictionary definition of the word. For Aboriginal Australians, we might mean homeland or tribal or clan area, and we might mean more than just a place on the map. For us, country is a word for all the values, places, resources, stories, and cultural obligations associated with that area and its features. It describes the entirety of our ancestral domains. It is on this land that my ancestors cared, lived, learned, and raised their families. I acknowledge and pay my respects to my elders, both past, present, and of the future. And I extend that respect to any other First Nations people who are present today. And I know that we are having people in Zoom land somewhere, so wherever country you are, may you also be blessed and have a nice day wherever you are. Maybe you can write in the inbox or something on Zoom land about what traditional country you're on today. I invite you all here to learn in this place and remember that well before these nice big buildings, the Ngunnawal people lived upon this land and continue to have connection to it. So I ask you today, to learn and take care of this beautiful country. Our land has never been given up or sold, always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Our land has never been given up or sold, always was and always will be Aboriginal land. It is time for all Australians to learn about our shared histories, cultures and achievements, and to explore how each of us can contribute and achieve reconciliation in Australia. We are all looking for significant and lasting change. Welcome to Ngunnawal lands, where we are meeting here today, but also wherever you are in Zoom land, and to look after each other and be kind as we are journey on these 3 days together. Welcome, 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 and let's have a great conference, and thank you, and I'll be around so you can just say hello to me wherever you like. So, Mandangu, thank you very much.
Thank you, Annie. I rat tested this morning, so I get to give Auntie a kiss, you see. Auntie, thank you for welcoming us to Ngunnawal, and from behalf of the National Gallery, we pay our deep respects to the Ngunnawal people and acknowledge the extraordinary contributions and wealth of the gorgeous and the Ngambri people, and pay our deep respects to both of these peoples. And in paying respects, I describe country for our blind peoples. Country is unique to its own environment. This country is surrounded by beautiful rivers going through it, mountains and birds that sing us awake every day. To audio describe myself, I'm on my mid to early 30s with brown messy hair, wearing a white shirt and black pants with a cream jacket. Let's continue on. Thank you, everyone, and thank you, Auntie. It is my absolute pleasure to invite up a man who I look up to and admire and respect in so many ways, the Director of the National Gallery of Australia, Nick Misovich.
Thank you very much, Ian. And Auntie Mary, we're always grateful for having your guidance. You work with us continuously on helping us share the National Collection. And Auntie Mary's just returned from working with us in Wagga Wagga for the first Wesfarmers Leadership Program of the year. And I know that the 12 new leaders that were part of that program were really inspired by your support. So thank you, Auntie Mary. And I just want to welcome you here as well to the National Gallery. This hybrid model is a really important way that we can maximise involvement. So thank you, the ones that are in the room, and for everyone else who's joining us online across Australia, thank you very much for being a part of this. I started my career as an art teacher, and art for me is not the job, it's actually an indenture, because it's such an important responsibility to teach people things. And the reason I was drawn to art was because I felt alive because of it. I found my place in the world. And art then became a part of all of my life. And to be an art teacher was something that was important to me. I was very fortunate to make the transition into a public gallery from teaching, because I kind of combined both of my passions. And so now I've been working in galleries for more than 30 years after I hung up my teaching. But in reflection, you never hang up the tools that you learned as a teacher. And I still today use them. And so in some ways, I never actually hung that up. So as we progress the National Gallery, as we think about what the important things for us are in the 21st century, which is to connect Australians with art, having a conference that's truly national is really important. So thank you for being a part of the 2022 National Visual Arts Education Conference. To self-describe myself to our audiences that are blind or have low vision, I'm a 52-year-old man from Greek and North Macedonian heritage with grey hair, working in the visual arts, as I said, for more than 30 years. So it's not just a job, it's an indenture. And I think that having the important responsibility of leading the National Collection is not lost on me. And the things that we prioritise are making sure that our First Nations artists have an important platform, and ensuring that we have the widest audience to share the visual arts. And those two things have led us over the last couple of years, and will continue to think about how the National Collection can be brought to life. And education and learning is such a key plank of our endeavours. And I want to thank Tim Fairfax for making sure that we can be truly national in the way that we make the visual arts accessible. I'm really looking forward to the speakers over the course of the next 3 days, because they touch on the things that lead us. And also, in a moment, you'll hear from Hetti Perkins, who has worked with us over the last 3 years on the National Indigenous Triennial ceremony, and also is our curator at large, helping elevate First Nations perspectives as we continue to prioritise the work of First Nations artists here at the National Gallery. I hope you enjoy coming together either online or on site, and sharing thoughts and ideas, because it's such an important responsibility to teach and lead people. And the visual arts have such richness that go beyond just the visual arts. And as we advance the work of female artists, as we prioritise multiple stories of Australian art history, and as we give more access to artists generally across the country, educators and teachers are a really important part of that ecosystem. So I thank you for your involvement with the National Gallery, and we look forward to the next 3 days. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nick. And as Nick has echoed, this is a wonderful national conference. And with that, I am now privileged to welcome the wonderful and the extraordinary Hetti Perkins from the Aranda and Kakadu peoples, Senior Curator at Large, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Art at the National Gallery of Australia, daughter of the famed advocate Charles Perkins, AO. Hetti has spent her whole life advocating for First Nations artists and arts. With over a 30-year career, she has co-curated the Pavilion at the Venice Biennale and has written, presented and produced documentary series for the ABC TV, SBS and NITV, and has worked on many projects, including Documenta 13. Hetti is a respected cultural practitioner and arts worker, particularly for her commitment to curation, collection development and scholarship of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander art, as well as her mentorship and advancement for our artists and arts makers. Today, Hetti joins us remotely from Gadigal Eora country in Sydney and provides an introduction to the 4th National Indigenous Arts Triennial ceremony, which showcases 18 new bodies of work by over 38 First Nations artists from across this nation known as Australia. I will hand it over to Hetti Perkins, who joins us remotely, and at the end of our presentation, we'll do a Q&A. Please come together with me to welcome Hetti Perkins. Thank you.
Hello, hi everyone, and sorry, I'll keep tapping my ears to make sure my things don't fall out. Look, it's a real pleasure to be here today virtually, and as Ian said, I'm in a place now called Sydney, but I'm a little bit more on the Wongal side of Gadigal country, so which is it's a beautiful day here. It's a beautiful country, and I think as Auntie Mary said in the welcome, you know, our country is still very strong and it's still very much a part of us. And as I was listening to Auntie Mary give a wonderful welcome to country, I felt that was all we really needed to say about ceremony in some ways. But like I said, it's a real pleasure to be here and to talk to you about this exhibition. And I really just felt like it would almost be like a virtual walk through the exhibition, some of the ideas the artists have shared and some of the ideas that led to the development of this exhibition. So thank you again to Auntie Mary for that beautiful welcome to Ngunnawal and Ngambri country. And as an Aranda and Kalkadoon person, I'd like to also acknowledge all of the artists who are in ceremony there as custodians of their lands across this beautiful nation, and also all of the staff at the gallery and those of us who are part of this conference. I acknowledge all of your custodianship of your ancestral lands, and as Auntie Mary said, always was and always will be. So I might begin with I should actually also self-describe. So I'm an Aboriginal woman and I'm 56 years old, of olive skin, dark hair, wearing a black jacket, also wearing glasses, and behind me on a black wall, I have two beautiful paintings that I'm fortunate enough to own by Pinta Japananga and Benny Japujari from the Papanyatula Artists Collective in Central Australia. So that's a little bit of what I look like, and I'm looking a little bit nervous, but very happy to be here. So thank you. I wonder if we should begin, just might walk you through some of the images from the exhibition and just talk about a little bit about each of them. And I'd really like to leave some time to be able to talk with people that are online and in the audience there at the National Gallery to ask some questions and just have a little chat about everything. So we might move forward. Oh yes, sorry, I have the clicker. Just see if that's working. Yes, thank you. So as you can see, ceremony here, it's a beautiful a beautiful sort of graphic image to represent the exhibition and what it's about. And one of the things that I really, I guess, was thinking about in developing the triennial at the invitation of the wonderful Nick Mitzovich was to really assert the fact that ceremony, I think people often think about it as something it's either part of the past, not part of the present day, but also something that only happens in particular parts of Australia. And so for me and the team that I worked with on this exhibition, Kelly Cole, Aidan Hartshorn and Peter Johnson, we really wanted to look at the ways that artists express that ceremonial connection in many different ways throughout their different practices. And so there's quite a diverse range of artists, the countries that they're from, but also what they're talking about and and the way that they express that connection to country. But it all comes down to this, it all comes back in some way in very new and innovative and contemporary, but still very connected ways to this idea of ceremony. So we really looked at this idea of ceremony being the nexus, of country, culture, and community. And and one of the things we were very pleased to do, and again picking up on what Auntie Mary said about the importance of acknowledging country and being welcomed onto country, was to really create a strong connection with this exhibition to the place that the National Gallery stands on. And of course, being Ngunnawal Ngambri country, these designs that you see that are inscribed in the word ceremony here are by Paul Girawa House and refer to the tree scarring. And it was really wonderful to actually, when we began working on this exhibition, to be talking with Bruce McLean about a proposal that Paul House and his mother, Dr. Matilda House, had put to the gallery to embark on a series of tree scarring projects in the gallery precinct, which is a project Paul is hoping will eventually spread right throughout the parliamentary triangle. And it's a very interesting proposition in one that it does assert the ceremonial, that this, Canberra itself, or Canberra, is a ceremonial place. It's still a place of ceremony, of culture, and it's an interesting intersection, given that where the National Gallery is located today is often described in sort of by white fella planning controls and stuff as a ceremonial place, a ceremonial parade ground, the parliamentary triangle. So there's this interesting intersection of sort of cultural geometries or cultural, placemaking. So here we can see, I've just shown there's a few slides of just how this sort of whole process works, and it's a beautiful process to watch. And those of you who live or have visited Canberra in recent times have probably seen Paul on the grounds of the gallery creating these beautiful scar trees. And it's useful, I think, to add that he's received so much interest from people, and particularly children who've asked if they can help. And he says the sort of makes a bit of a joke, but it's a serious fun when he says that, some of the kids have come up to him and said, "Oh, are you allowed to do that?" And he said, "Yes, I asked my mum and she said I could." And I think that's a really cute way of sort of thinking about not only that inherited tradition, but the way that in a contemporary sense, in a contemporary world, it is still very strong, and one that, Paul and his mother are very generous in wanting to share with the wider community. So here you can see he's incised the shape of the tree scar, and with the piece of bark that he removes from the tree, he's made some beautiful kulamons that will potentially become part of the National Gallery's collection. And I was really always impressed with the way that when he's undertaking this process, he really talks to the trees. He's pouring water on the tree as he's doing it, and so he's creating this very important sort of cultural context within which he can undertake this ceremonial act of creating the scar. Here you can see him working on some of the designs, which are very much related to this country and totemic beings and ancestral stories from this area. and there's one of the finished trees, and it's a beautiful thing to be able to walk around the gallery and actually the gallery precinct and sort of come across some of them quite unexpectedly. You know, they're not presented in a way that's very kind of monumental or sort of a plonk sculpture. You know, they're much more integrated within country, and they're a constant reminder of you know, whose country this is and the ancient connection that people have to this place. And to my mind, I feel like when I'm walking through the gardens that it's almost like a conversation that's happening, you know, a sort of a beautiful whispered conversation, and you can really feel sort of part of that story and part of that narrative. I am sort of going to go quite quickly through them because I'm conscious of not taking up too much time this morning. And I think one of the things that we were really excited about then picking up on the connection, you know, that the triennial takes place in Canberra. It is obviously a contested site. And one of the things that is a real indication of that, of course, is the lake, Lake Burley Griffin, which was flooded in, I think, 1963. And during the flooding of that country, a ceremonial ground, which still exists, except it is underwater, was flooded next to which is near the present day site of the National Museum of Australia. And so when we were talking to this artist, Robert Fielding, who of course is from Mimili in the Anangu, Pitjantjatjara and Yankunytjatjara lands in South Australia, he wanted to create one of his quite famous car wreck, if you like, works and bring that to Canberra. And so we really talked to him about the idea of this lake and the idea that, you know, it's a way of the impact it's had on country and on the ceremonial ground, as I said earlier. And so we decided to sort of try and float this car, put this car on the lake. And one of the impressions I think that people will have as they walk past is, well, that's really surreal. What's a car doing out in the middle of the lake? But of course, it's the lake itself that is actually surreal. So it makes it's again quite a subtle, but I think really elegantly made point by the artist Robert Fielding. This work is called Holden On. And one of the things he's talking about in this work is the fact that these, you know, the importance of cars that have in remote area communities, particularly where there's no other means of transport, for people to maintain ceremony, to maintain their family connections, and of course to care for country and to practice culture. And so we worked with him in finding a car, 1963 Holden. It had to be a Holden because, of course, he's as any of you who have met him or heard him speak know, he's a wonderful wordsmith, and he makes a play on the idea of Holden and Holden on to culture. So continuing through, one of the things too with ceremony was that the idea of that, you know, within ceremonies are active, you know, they activate, and they are an action that has an active outcome. And so one of the things we were talking about with artists is this idea of like a formula that might have like an active ingredient or a radical agent, how that might be something that is part of their work, or we were looking at artists where that is very much a feature of their work. And so performance is something that came through very strongly when we were working on this exhibition with the artists. And interestingly, one of the artists is a very Joel Bray, a Wiradjuri man, who's a really wonderful dancer and choreographer and theatre maker, actually proposed doing a video of his work. And it was the phrase, the work means the wind will bring the rain. And one of the inspirations for Joel was that when he was, he lives in Naarm or Melbourne, when he's away from country, he'll often, particularly during COVID, when he was, you know, obviously Melbourne went through significant lockdown and so on, he'd watch the weather radar, the rain radar, and when he saw the rain was coming from Wiradjuri country over Melbourne where he lives, he would go out and stand in the rain and let that, you know, he would connect with country in that way by standing in the rain and letting, you know, the rain soaking his skin. And so this is really a kind of this video work, which is a multi-channel, multi-screen work and soundtrack. Sorry, just excuse me for a sec. Is very much it's a celebration of his country, and expresses his connection to country, and was very much inspired by this idea of being away from country and that sort of homesickness, that kind of literally that sickness that people get being away from country. And he looked at, and actually with the help of Ian, connected with the Wagga Wagga Elders group, and particularly Uncle James Ingram, who worked with him in finding locations in that beautiful part of the Wiradjuri Nation to film these different works. And it's very much about him. As you can see, he's got chroma key technologies used, so he's painted onto his body and then projecting other images into that space, so almost internalizing that country and expressing how country is. It's a very visceral, corporeal connection that our people have to place. And then also looking at some of the changes, through agriculture and industrialization and so on, and the impact that has had on country. But again, that very strong idea that country, maintains, whether it's layered in concrete or, buildings or whatever, country is still there, and it's very much the strong and beating heart of our communities. There's another image just to sort of show you some of the different shots. It's quite small for me, so I can't see it properly. But and then again, there is this very beautiful soundtrack that accompanies the work. So speaking of Canberra as being quite a contested site, and the idea of ceremony, particularly as I spent a lot of years growing up in Canberra, and was very much part of the political, protests. So the founding of the Tent Embassy, for instance, which of course this year is celebrating its 50th anniversary, which is a significant achievement. And it got me thinking about that, what is ceremony and what we understand of a ceremony. And growing up, I very much felt that political protest, whether it was the demonstrations or sit-ins or, something like the Tent Embassy, are a form of ceremony in themselves. It involves a lot of people coming together. Different people have their different roles to play. There's a different outcome, a collective outcome that people are working towards, and that outcome is always for the greater good. It's a positive thing. It's to create benefits for all the community, and that's how I see these protest actions, and especially with the very significant anniversary of very long and sustained action like the Tent Embassy in front of the old Parliament House. I think it's something to really sort of celebrate and to acknowledge the achievements that have happened over time. And so we talked to the artists from the Yarrant, Yalpa and Tangentyere art centres in Mbantua and Alice Springs about their ideas and what they felt, they would contribute to a show like Ceremony. And we talked to all of the artists about, Canberra and that it's Ngunnawal and Ngambri country, but it's also this kind of, whitefella political heartland, and some of the things that they thought, they would like to, there's some of the things that they would like to express in the context of that. And so very much within that idea of protest movements and, collective action being a form of ceremony. And many of these artists, particularly Marlene Robinshaw, who sort of led the group, their immediate family were very much involved in the protests in, the self-determination and land rights movements in Central Australia. And indeed, it was out of that the town camps were established around Mbantua, of which these artists, where these artists live and work. And that was very much a big part of that sort of self-determination movement around the Northern Territory Land Rights Act and so on in the 1970s. And so for many of these artists, they feel that they express through this work that, Canberra for them is a place where, people make decisions, as I think Marlene says, these white men on television are making decisions for that, that immediately affect their lives. And of course, particularly in recent years, the intervention is a very good / bad example of people making decisions that, as I said, directly affect the lives of people without them being consulted or consenting to these, often quite drastic changes to their lives. So what they really wanted to do was to sort of create their own Black Parliament House. And of course, it's BLAK. And I'm sure many of you know the work of Destiny Deacon and how a wonderful artist and how she coined that term Black for reasons that I won't go into right now. But it is a way of also expressing this kind of reclaiming of language as well, which is another theme, a very strong theme in this exhibition. So here you see the Parliament House with its very distinctive architectural features, and behind it, what is Kurrajong Hill, or now called Capitol Hill, is like a humpy, which of course is very much a part of something that's very well known in Central Australia. We've got a beautiful flag with two options of the flag. One flag side is kind of a country landscape. And in this case, it's Heavy Tree Gap in Alice Springs, and on the other side is a more conventional kind of flag shape. So again, it's making that connection between, what is a flag, and that having a connection to country indeed is much more of a symbol of custodianship, I suppose, rather than ownership of a place. Around the soakage, or the sort of water hole in front, you can see all these various figures, dancing women, birds, these wonderful sort of fantastical creatures. And it's really about expressing this way that this parliament, or this, it has a role. It should represent everyone. Everyone's interests should be represented in this place, and should be conducted in a way that is more commensurate with community and collaborative principles. You can see in one of the images, there's even the Queen there, who's having and I asked Marlene, is she saluting or waving? And she said she's waving like the Queen waves. So everyone's got a place in this conversation. And I think that what it says to me anyway is that everyone should have an equal voice and an equal place. And around the sculpture, the soft sculpture, you can see all of these amazing protest placards, which very much are a reference to, acknowledge the role of the tent embassy, and also that, our people, a lot of people of my generation and before, and continue to be involved in protest action. That is very much a part of our lives as contemporary First Nations people. And I think that it's for many of us, walking past, I see signs that, what do we want? Land rights, always was, always will be. Again, I'm touching on Auntie Mary's words this morning. These have become very important sort of mantras in our lives, and it's a way of expressing our unity as First Nations people, while recognising we come from very diverse backgrounds, but we do have this collective thing, which is this ceremony, which connects us to our country, our culture, and our communities. This beautiful work in the foyer by Penny Evans, it's a really significant work. It took over 2 years for her to make this work for the exhibition, and luckily, she was able to complete the work. She lives in the Northern Rivers region and experienced the terrible flooding that's happened in recent times, as well as bushfires. And so this work is very much at its heart about climate change, which is another theme that comes through very strongly in this exhibition. Of course, if we're talking about ceremony and country, and a lot of ceremonies are about country and about nurturing country and regenerating country and expressing that connection. So there's over 280 individual pieces in this installation, and it was really inspired by Penny visiting a site in Yagal country, which is close to where she lives, and she's got some really strong connections to Yagal community and has permission to visit that country and work on that country. And she visited it over a number of years after two big bushfires, wildfires had gone through that place. And she was really looking at the Banksia and how the Banksia had been, their experience of the bushfire, whether they'd sort of just been mildly experienced or they'd been absolutely devastated, but also the recovery rates of the Banksia. And so you'll see as you look into these works and look at them very closely, some are, quite burnt out, others have just been sort of received a surface burn or so on. But it's really also making equivalence because they're so anthropomorphic. These sort of Banksia pods, or pods, I guess. She's really giving them this beautiful sort of human quality. And in the grouping that she's arranged here with this installation, as she was grouping it, she was saying, like, for instance, you can see in the lower bottom right, she calls that a grandmother with all the grandkids around her. And then other forms throughout the installation refer to kinship systems. So Penny is Gumawai, and so she's talking about some of those kinship systems in her country. Many of the kind of very singular objects she calls elders, and then she talks about them. Some of them are dancing, some of them are congregating, having talks, but she's also wanting to sort of capture like the feel of a fire front sweeping through country. So you can see sparks flying on the top of the work, and also sort of spiraling forms that indicate, like smoke and other things. So it's a very beautiful, very complex, but very, very engaging animated work that really speaks to Penny's connection to country and makes a real equivalence between, the cataclysmic effect of bushfire, and then with the sort of effect of colonisation on our people, and how different, how that trauma is manifested, and how people recover, and people, some more slowly than others, and so on. So it's a really deeply evocative work and very moving. Ooh, I'm very late. I have to rip through these. This is Kumanara Carroll, who's from Pukaja in South Australia, also in the APY lands. Wonderful ceramicist. Very sadly, he passed away last year, and but was able to complete these beautiful works before that for us. And these are inspired by a trip. He had to leave the Northern Territory as a young man, and made his way, by himself on a donkey to Pukaja, and where he started a family and settled down. And it wasn't until he was an old man that he was able to return to his father's country, Pintupi country, in the Western Desert. And these beautiful ceramics are a result of that experience of celebrating the distinctive sites, ceremonial sites within his father's country. And it was a theme he returned to again and again. And iteration is something that I think is very much a important part of my understanding of what ceremony means. It's that idea of, particularly in an oral-based culture, where things are said over and over again, whether through song or ceremony or even through mark making. But and this sort of idea of iteration as opposed to just repetition is something that I think is a very distinctive form of ceremony. It's also why we have, it's been one of the things that has enabled us to be the inheritors of the world's continuous oldest cultural tradition. And so there's so that's beautiful. Manara Carroll's outstanding ceramics, and we're very grateful to his family and his widow, Mrs. Carroll, for allowing us to continue to show the works and images of the artist. This idea of iteration continues in these works by Mantua Nungala. This collective that Mantua Nungala is part of, the Papanutula Artists Collective, also celebrates its 50th anniversary, which is quite an achievement for an Aboriginal owned and run art company in Australia. and the National Gallery acquired this incredible triptych, which is the first, it's actually the first time that the collective has made a work on this scale in its 50-year history. So it's very appropriately found its home in the National Collection. And work is about the ancestral women from around, who travel quite widely, but around at a particular site called Marapinti, which is just very close to Kirikora, which is just across the border into Western Australia from the Northern Territory, where Nangala lives and works. And the very fine detail of these works, the beautiful, again, that active iteration of mark making over and over and over again. I think to me, it really talks about what I've witnessed, with artists making work and so on, this kind of space that an artist goes to, this kind of to channel that kind of energy and that connection, that kind of that sort of ceremonial current, if you like, that comes through them and onto whether it's the canvas or the ceramic or whatever medium they're working in. I think that's something that these works very, very strongly express and capture, and they really sort of harness the power of the Jukabad, those ancestral stories, and translate them onto in this case, a two-dimensional surface, which is no mean feat. And I think they really resonate. For me, they really express that power, the power of that Jukabad, that from Marapinti, that way. So just tearing through them a little bit quickly now. This is Daryl Sibasato. He's a bard artist who lives at Lombardina in northwestern Australia, just a couple of hours south of Broome. And in these works, he's drawing on Ridgie, the tradition of bard people of incising pearl shell, which is used in ceremonial performance, but also for trading with other groups. And on this occasion, he has chosen to create this work in neon LED and to create them on a scale that is really commensurate with the significance of the designs, but also the Ridgie shell. The Ridgie shells themselves, the pearl shells, are the scales of the rainbow serpent. And then these various designs here that he's chosen to include in this exhibition really talk about ceremony, but talk about it as it's not just the event. It's not, for instance, a dance performance that might happen at the conclusion of the ceremony. It starts with the individual and their place in the community, who they are, what their role is, what age they are, what family kinship connections they have, and all of these things feed into a ceremony, and that determines, the outcome and the various stages that people go through in their lives. So here he's created 3 designs which relate to a fish trap, moor or a pathway, and then on the right-hand side is imagery representing the warrior. So they're very powerful images, speak very directly to this long-standing ancient tradition from this country, but rendered in a way that is, captures all of the vitality, all of that history, and really brings it into the 21st century. And as Daryl says, it's Aboriginal art because he's Aboriginal and he's making it now. So he really emphasises that direct continuum between the past and the present, and of course indicates, lays the foundations for the future as well. Daryl shares the space in the exhibition with Guti Yunupingu from Yirrkala in northeast Arnhem Land. This wonderful work is quite a major work for Guti. He's quite young but extremely talented, and in this work he represents himself as his ancestor being Maralach, the ancestor from his country, but also he expresses his role or his place as saltwater man and his connection to Baru, the crocodile. And so throughout the course of this video, you see Guti sort of becoming part of his ancestral story, becoming sort of like the ancestor. Then he's like, you see the point of view of Baru, the crocodile, going into the water. So again, it's this very immersive sort of insider's view of country and relationship to country. I beg your pardon. This beautiful room is devoted to the work of Nicole Forshu and the late Buljangali from Warman community in Western Australia, a Gidger artist, and Nicole Forshu is a Wiradjuri artist who's living and working in Gumbanya country now. But Nicole spent a number of years developing this wonderful friendship, and which started out as sort of a mentorship and became a beautiful and enduring friendship with this late artist. And so really wanted to bring into ceremony the both of their works together, to honour that partnership and sort of talk about that legacy, to pay tribute to that old lady, but also to say that this this connection between them continues well beyond the present time. It's beyond sort of time, and it's a bit like Daryl's with the past, the present, and the future. These things transcend time, and so Buljangali paintings, as you can see on the previous here work, Gamera, are about the scarification, the body scarification that's used as protection. It's a very distinctive feature of many of our communities right across the country to do this ceremonial mark making on the body. And Nicole's work, in some way, it looks like the ochres. They sort of bleed through these beautiful vessels she's made, which become these sort of almost vessels for the memory, that are arranged in almost like a shrine-like way in front of these works, to acknowledge that old lady and her significance. And for Nicole, it was also very important to do this practice, to iterate, to make these bowls over and over again, using the ochres that had been gifted to her by Buljangali. It became a form of healing for her. And so, of course, art making is very much about healing, as ceremony is as well, in certain contexts. And so the other work that Nicole made for ceremony is this beautiful work, which is in Fiona Hall's Fern Garden, which is a beautiful healing mist, and it's centred with sense that Nicole has harvested from her country, or up in Gumbanya country where she lives. And so as you enter this beautiful mist, you are enveloped in this very healing sort of space. But it also, people will recognise references to smoking ceremonies, and obviously in ceremony fire is often the central part, the kind of focus point for the activities that might happen. So yeah, it's a beautiful, wonderful work. Then going into, this is Andy Snellgar, who's a very talented artist, carver, maker, gatherer of bush materials. And when he's harvesting materials to make his beautiful shields and clubs and the piti, he talks about looking for the song in the tree and finding that song and bringing those works into bringing that song, if you like, into three-dimensional form. And each of these works have a very particular story to them, whether it's a story, his own personal story, or a bigger story, like celebrating, for instance, as he says, Mother Earth being the foundation for everything, and then talking, but then some of his own personal stories. I'm wondering if I'm out of time. Is that, who can tell me whether I am or not? Okay, got a few more minutes. All right, sorry. Sorry, everyone, I'm not very good at this sort of thing. This is a beautiful work, pardon me, James Tyler, a Ghana artist who is now living in Ngunnawal Ngambri country. And it's a series of daguerreotypes and objects cast in bronze to accompany them. And what he's talking about here is that he's talking about, in some ways, about the loss in the early days of colonisation in his country. You know, he says that there was this opportunity for a lot of garner material, language and stories and so on, to be, kept and collected and remembered, so that people could maintain that connection in the present day. And so, but what he's doing now is he's sort of piecing together that history, and he's creating a portrait of country in this work, and using with images that he's taken himself of country, and created these beautiful daguerreotypes, which are those small, the small, very vintage ways of taking photos, but very beautiful, very evocative. And then he's placed objects between them, which might have a particular significance to that place or tell part of that story. And so it's his way of sort of, I guess, mapping country, and in that way mapping culture and community and ceremony, by bringing together these images of place and these very significant objects that are attached to that place and tell that story. Here is wonderful works again by Margaret Raru and Helen Galamuroi from Milingimbi in Arnhem Land, and the beautiful Mol Mindir, which are the black dilly bags you can see right on the left-hand side, and then of course the loricon, the hollow log coffins. And one of the things that's very distinctive about this this installation by these two artists who are sisters who work together is that they have developed, they'd found this kind of technique for making black dye, and which is a secret recipe, and they've become very well known for these distinctive, black bags, black dilly bags, which I think I've got. Yeah, you can see here that they've got these incredible sort of range of tones, dark tones throughout them, and they're very beautiful. When asking, I didn't. This is from a previous interview that Margaret Roru did. That's why do you do them black? And she said, because black is beautiful. And so I sort of love that. But I also love the way that they're so austere, and then they've brought this design, or Helen Galamuroi brought this idea of decorating these dilly bags, which sometimes will have bands of black and white, and to make that, to apply that design logic, if you like, or methodology to the loricon. And so here you see these magpie goose, a reference to a magpie goose, this beautiful black and white banding on these three loricon, which is, something that is quite new. And they were saying it's like weaving design translated into, in this case, this particular sculptural form. And of course, dilly bags or mindir are very much part of foundational ancestral stories from that country, the Junkawu sisters, who were responsible for creating the different moieties and country, and they travelled quite widely, and that's a story that is collectively shared over vast geography by many of the clans and language groups throughout Arnhem Land. And so it's a beautiful way of, again, bringing that something that, because the Junkawu sisters carried these mindir, they were sacred objects, and they contained sacred objects that had a very active and functional and creative role. And so again, it's that continuing of that story and into the present day, and this idea of innovation that I think has been one of the reasons why we have been able to sustain our culture over millennia, and particularly in the last couple of 100 years when there's been significant challenges. That kind of innovation and inventiveness, and that kind of really celebratory, love of culture and country continues to be expressed in these artists' works, and these are a wonderful example. And the idea of expressing ceremony, but because ceremonies, of course, they can be collective events. They can be whether it's a Wulyard in Central Australia, or whether it's a protest, here in Canberra, but they can often also be very intimate, very, very personal, very private acts that people undertake. It can be, for instance, the welcomes to country, or acknowledging country. When I've been doing the drive from Gadigal Wongal country up to Ngambri Ngunnawal country, I always try and think of whose country I'm when I'm driving, and where I am, and sort of acknowledging that as I travel through country. So you can be doing it behind the wheel of a car, or in this case with Hayley Miller Baker, which was her first film work that she has made. She's very well known for her black and white, large-scale photography. Hayley Miller Baker, she really tried to express her sort of a process that she goes through every night, of this very intimate, personal, ceremonial process in which she engages with the spirit world, and using for Hayley, using the black and white is very much part of being seen as a way of being seen as the truth. People think photographs are the truth, and so she's in this way. She's really telling a personal truth about her as a Gunditjmara woman. And Jabberung woman, living in Naarm, and how ceremony is part of her everyday experience. It's a lot of everyday ritual that she does as preparing for the evening. Ian, have you beautifully popped up like a work of art to tell me to stop?
Oh, Hetti, thank you. I mean, you're the work of art, and what an extraordinary exhibition the ceremony is, and a huge congratulations to you and Kelly and Aidan and the whole gallery. You have all done such a wonderful job. I've been blown away by it. So thank you so much for sharing everything today. Hetti, I wish I could
Pete, don't forget Pete, who was the...
And Pete, of course, I'm so sorry. I'm a dill. And Pete, and thank you for that. And Hetti, I wish I could just reach through and give you a big hug, and thank you so much for being here today. So we are now going to open up to our delegates any questions. And just for a reminder, for anyone who's watching online at the National Gallery on site, use the sidlo.com and enter the code NVAEC, NVAEC. That's NVAEC. And for those who are watching online, you can ask questions in the plenary Q&A section to interact with, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. And I see that we have a few coming up, and we're a little over time, but how can you fit over 60,000 years plus into such a short time? So who cares? But we will try to get in on time to make sure that we're honouring people's breaks. We have one question that's come up here. Hetti, why is art such a critical part of our education and our ceremonial systems?
I think that, art, there's a lot of... I've already taken up too much time, so I won't try to answer I'll try and answer in 20 words or less, but I think, art making is really critical actually with First Nations communities, in many First Nations communities, because for many of our communities, it is really the only way that people can live in a way in a contemporary Australia, in a way that is, culturally, socially, as well as, economically viable. It's many people still live on country. They maintain that connection to country. They're not making lifestyle choices. They're living there because that is their ancestral country, and they're caring for that country. And in doing that, they are caring for all of us, and so I think that's one reason why art is so important. But I think also in education, because it's a way of, I guess, when I opened our chat today, I talked about Paul Gurua House being approached by kids and members of the public and being asked to, what he was doing. And of course, saying it doesn't hurt the tree. And, so people approaching him, they care for country too, and he welcomes that. And then he welcomes the conversation. And then when people were understanding what he was doing, they wanted to be part of it. Like they wanted to help him carve it. They wanted to tell that story. They ran back and told their parents, they asked if he had permission. So in that way, it's really much, it's something that everyone understands and everyone gets. And I think that when we have opportunities to engage through art in the many different forms that can take, we find a lot of common ground, and we find more understanding, and we find that the things that connect us are many more than the things that, you know, divide us. And I think that, so for me, you know, obviously that really ties into education outcomes. I don't know if that's an answer, but just
I love that. The things that connect us, and what a wonderful way to explore that question. Thank you, Hetti. We have another question. They said, thank you, Hetti. And did any of the artists of this exhibition work together to influence one another in the creation of their work for ceremony?
Well, yes, that's a great question. Thank you. And it's something I should have mentioned. I think I was getting to that. The next room was the one where I was going to talk about that. But I should just say that even though I haven't mentioned quite a number of the artists, and I apologise for not getting to them, but we do have a wonderful digital publication which privileges the artist's voice, and I really recommend people get on that. And there's interviews with the artists, just really unfiltered, just them talking about their practices. So I feel a little less guilty. But one of the key things that came out of the exhibition was this very strong connection, for instance, to language. And that was really a vehicle for people collaborating in many ways. So Paul Giroir House and his mother, of course, Dr. Matilda House, were very generous in working with artists like, say, Robert Andrew, to gift him a phrase for his beautiful writing machine. S.J. Norman also spoke with them about the work that he's done for the exhibition, Bone Library. And they were also across quite a few of the artists' work to just sort of understand what was happening and sort of give their blessing, really. And I just can't say a bit. We'd like the same with Auntie Mary Atkinson, you know, the incredible generosity and welcoming spirit that the artists felt was offered to them was really made a difference in their ability and their confidence and their willingness to engage with this exhibition on not on their own country. So it's always really important. So yes, there was, and of course Aidan Hartshorn, who is the Wesfarmers curatorial person, don't know his title exactly. He was not only one of the curatorial team on ceremony, but he actually collaborated as a Waggaloo man who collaborated with S.J. Norman in creating the Bone Library using word lists of from the Waggaloo language, him and his father.
And his father and Aidan are doing such extraordinary things. We have another question. What was the most difficult or challenging part of curating the ceremony?
I think on a very sort of, one of the challenges, of course, that we've all had is COVID, because we had to just sort of delay the exhibition and our ability to travel to communities, not so much our ability, but also our willingness to travel to different communities, not just in, say, the Northern Territory, but sort of anywhere really, we were very, very careful and very cautious about that, and not wanting to put people at risk, and particularly around the opening and stuff, we were very conscious of it all the time. And I think the gallery was wonderful in sort of taking that on board and taking that seriously, and, you know, being really guided by us about when the show should happen in terms of what would be the most safest time of the year and everything. So that was a real challenge. But also I think that it was, you know, it is 18 newly commissioned sort of site-specific works. And as you know, many of them, as I mentioned, outdoor works. We've had to have special permissions from special places like that, you know, protect this ceremonial ground from a white collar point of view. And, you know, of course, those permissions were all received and everything, so that was all good. But I think, yeah, just the, you know, challenge of working with artists who, some of whom are not, their practice is not what many people would think of as being an artistic practice, you know, not artistic in this kind of visual arts context anyway. So, you know, dancers, architects, performance artists, you know, a whole host of different capabilities all sort of coming together in this one frame it was quite a challenge. And I think it was, again, you know, credit to the National Gallery and all the team, especially the First Nations staff, for you know, jumping in and supporting the works.
And with that, takes us to a comment, our last comment coming in, talking about that nexus, right? That amalgamation of that song, that story and dance that you brought into the space with you and the fabulous First Nations team at the gallery and all of the wonderful arts practitioners and artists that we've worked with in ceremony. We have a comment here saying, thank you, Hetti. I love your comment that ceremony is a nexus of country, culture, and community. And with that, I thank you, Hetti, from the bottom of my heart. It is truly an extraordinary, world-class exhibition, and I recommend that all of our delegates, both on-site and, as Hetti has referenced, our digital publication online, take the opportunity to visit here the National Gallery's exhibition and online the exhibition. Before we take a break for morning tea,